A mother and her daughter vanished during what was meant to be a simple Amazon jungle tour, swallowed whole by the rainforest with no trace left behind. But 9 weeks later, during a desperate search mission, her husband finds something shocking, a discovery that changes everything. The humid air of the Amazon jungle clung to Jordan Hart's skin like a second layer as he trudged through the dense foliage. His boots sank into the soft earth with each step, and the walking stick in his right hand helped him maintain balance on the uneven terrain. The backpack he carried felt heavier by the hour, weighing down his already burdened shoulders, both physically and emotionally. 9 weeks. It had been 9 weeks since his wife Julia and 10-year-old daughter Daphne had disappeared during what was supposed to be a routine river tour. 9 weeks of desperate searching, sleepless nights, and dwindling hope. 2 Colombian police officers walked ahead of him, machetes occasionally slicing through the more stubborn vines blocking their path. Officer Diego Mendoza, the taller of the two, wiped sweat from his brow before turning back to Jordan. "Senor Hart, we have been searching for 4 hours now," he said in accented but fluent English. "We have found nothing new compared to the previous searches." Jordan nodded, but kept walking. The second officer, Carlos Ruiz, exchanged a glance with his colleague. "Perhaps it is time to consider heading back," Officer Ruiz suggested carefully. "The conditions here are not favorable, and it will be getting dark in a few hours." "Just a bit longer," Jordan replied, his voice hoarse from the humid air. "Please." Officer Mendoza sighed, but didn't argue. Instead, he said what Jordan knew they'd been thinking, but had been too polite to verbalize directly. "Senor Hart, I understand your determination, but you must understand. No one can survive for 9 weeks in this jungle without proper supplies and knowledge. There are countless dangers, wild animals, quicksand, floods, storms." "We found their boat 2 weeks ago," Officer Ruiz added. "The damage suggests it was caught in strong currents. We believe they may have encountered a storm or simply gotten lost with their guide." Jordan's jaw tightened. "My wife is resourceful. Daphne is smart. They could have found shelter. Found a village?" "Senor," Officer Mendoza cut in gently. "Surviving this long would be nearly impossible, even for the most experienced jungle explorers." A heavy silence fell between them as they continued walking. The constant symphony of jungle sounds, birds calling, insects buzzing, the distant chatter of monkeys, filled the void. After another 20 minutes of trekking, Officer Ruiz stopped abruptly. "The terrain ahead is known for dangerous wildlife. Jaguars have been spotted frequently in this area. We should turn back." Jordan looked up at the sky. Despite the dense canopy, he could see patches of clear blue. "The weather is good today. We should make full use of it, maybe just a few more miles. Or we could circle around this area, avoid the wildlife territory." The officers exchanged another look before Officer Mendoza reluctantly nodded. "We will continue, but only if you agree to one condition. If we smell animal urine or waste, or if we hear suspicious noises, we leave immediately. No arguments?" "Agreed," Jordan said quickly, not wanting to lose this opportunity. They altered their course slightly and pressed on. As they walked, Officer Ruiz began telling a story that made Jordan's stomach turn. 3 years ago, a tourist ignored warnings and ventured into this very section alone. We found only his camera and parts of his backpack. The jaguar had dragged the rest into the underbrush. Jordan felt a cold chill despite the oppressive heat. He tried to block out the gruesome details as the officer continued, detailing how they had tracked the animal and found the remains. But part of him couldn't help but wonder. Was this the fate that had befallen his family? Were Julia and Daphne now nothing more than tragic statistics, victims of the unforgiving jungle? Number. He refused to believe it, not until he had proof. As Officer Ruiz's story reached its grisly conclusion, something caught Jordan's eye. A large tree to their right, partially obscured by vines, had unusual markings on its trunk. At first glance, They looked like animal scratches, but there was something oddly methodical about them. "Wait," Jordan called out, stopping the officers mid-stride. "Look at that tree." Both officers turned, following his pointed finger. "Those don't look like claw marks," Jordan said, approaching the tree. "They look like someone was trying to carve something but was searching for the right spot." His heart began to race as he circled the tree, pushing aside hanging vines. And there it was, on the opposite side of the trunk, clearly visible and meticulously carved, a set of coordinates followed by the letter J. "Look!" Jordan called excitedly, waving the officers over. "Someone carved coordinates here." The officers approached, examining the markings. Officer Mendoza pulled out his phone and typed in the coordinates. As he looked at the result, Jordan noticed a subtle shift in his demeanor. The officer's expression hardened, and he quickly pocketed his phone. "This is nothing," Officer Mendoza said dismissively. "Actually, I think these markings have been here for a long time. We've seen them before during previous searches, right, Officer Ruiz?" Officer Ruiz cleared his throat and nodded. "Yes, I think so." Jordan frowned. "Are you sure?" "They look fresh to me." He ran his finger over the carved numbers and letter. The wood beneath felt smooth, and the color was lighter than the surrounding bark, a sign of recent carving. "And what about the J? My wife's name is Julia?" Officer Ruiz shrugged. "J could stand for anything. Julio, Jose, Juan, it's a common initial." "We are certain these have been here for some time," Officer Mendoza added firmly. Jordan wasn't convinced, but he nodded slowly, deciding not to push the issue. He discreetly took out his phone and snapped a photo of the coordinates while the officers were looking elsewhere. Suddenly, Officer Ruiz stiffened, nose in the air. "Do you smell that?" Officer Mendoza nodded, his hand moving to his holstered weapon. "Jaguar." "We need to go back to the station now." But Jordan didn't notice anything. When he glanced down, he noticed something the others had missed, a broken piece of wood on the ground, sharpened to a point. It looked exactly like the kind of makeshift tool someone would use to carve into a tree. As the officers turned to leave, Jordan quickly picked up the wood splinter and slipped it into his backpack. "What about the coordinates?" Jordan asked, jogging to catch up to the officers who were already walking briskly in the direction they had come. "Shouldn't we check them out?" "Even if they're old, my wife and daughter might have seen them and gone there." "We will discuss this at the station," Officer Mendoza replied curtly. "For now, we need to focus on getting back to the boat safely." The walk back to the river took 45 minutes, a tense journey during which both officers seemed unusually alert, hands never straying far from their weapons. When they finally reached the riverbank, Jordan felt both relief and frustration. They boarded the waiting boat, and the captain immediately started the engine, steering them back toward civilization. As the boat cut through the murky waters, Jordan pulled out his phone and opened the photo of the coordinates. Bringing up an online map, he input the numbers and saw that they pointed to a location in Volpe Department near the Inirida River, a remote forested region of Colombia. He was about to search for more information about the area when the boat suddenly lurched to one side, throwing him off balance. Officer Mendoza stumbled into him, and in the confusion, Jordan's phone slipped from his grasp and plunged into the river. "No!" Jordan shouted, watching in horror as his phone disappeared beneath the surface. "All my contacts? My only way to communicate with home?" Without thinking, he stripped off his shirt and shoes and dove into the water. The current wasn't strong here, and the river was relatively calm, allowing him to dive down toward the riverbed. The murky water stung his eyes, but he could just make out the faint glow of his phone screen below. His lungs burning, Jordan reached out and grasped the device, then kicked hard toward the surface. Breaking through with a gasp, he swam back to the boat where the officers helped pull him aboard. Water dripped from his phone as he climbed back into the boat, his mind racing with questions about the coordinates and the officers' strange behavior. Jordan sat dripping wet on the boat's bench seat, staring at his waterlogged phone. The screen was still illuminated, but he knew electronic devices and water didn't mix well. Acting quickly, he turned it off and removed the battery, trying to drain as much water as possible by shaking it. Maldición, he muttered under his breath, a Spanish curse he'd picked up during his time in Colombia. Without his phone, he felt even more isolated than before. How would Julia and Daphne contact him if they were trying to reach out? What if they were somewhere trying to call him right now? "Do not worry, Senor Hart," Officer Ruiz said, noticing his distress. "If they need to reach you, they will call the police, and we will notify you immediately." Jordan nodded, but the reassurance felt hollow. He knew that without access to his phone, he also couldn't check the coordinates again without having to ask the officers he was beginning to trust less and less. The boat journey back to civilization passed in tense silence. When they reached the dock, they transferred to a waiting jeep and drove to the police station in Mitu. Upon arrival, Officer Mendoza directed Jordan to a waiting room. "Please wait here while we discuss our next steps." "Before my phone fell," Jordan said, "I saw that the coordinates pointed somewhere in Valpé's department close to Inirida River." Officer Mendoza nodded. "That's correct, but we need to formulate a proper search plan. This is police work, Senor Hart. You cannot join the discussion." Jordan wanted to protest, but decided it was better to appear compliant. "I understand." Once alone in the waiting room, Jordan sat at a small table and took a yellow notepad and pen from the desk. He quickly wrote down what he could remember of the coordinates. 2.3 degrees north and 69.8 degrees west, followed by the letter J. He folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket. As he sat waiting, his mind wandered back to how this nightmare had begun. The three of them, Jordan, Julia, and Daphne, had been enjoying their family vacation in Colombia. They'd spent a week exploring Bogotá and Cartagena before heading to the Amazon region for what was supposed to be the highlight of their trip. The day everything changed, Jordan had woken up with severe food poisoning from something he'd eaten the night before. They only had 3 days left in Colombia, and Daphne had been looking forward to the jungle tour for months. "You should still go," he had told Julia and Daphne that morning, bent over with stomach cramps. "The hotel said it's perfectly safe. Take lots of pictures for me." Julia had been hesitant. "Are you sure? We can wait until tomorrow when you're feeling better." "No, go ahead. It's just a few hours, right? I'll be fine by the time you get back, and you can tell me all about it." That was the last time he'd seen them. The canoe tour, booked through their hotel's excursion desk, was supposed to be a common tourist activity, safe, supervised, and brief. But Julia, Daphne, and their guide had never returned. Jordan was jolted from his thoughts when an officer carrying a laptop approached him. "Senor Hart, we have some new information for you." Jordan followed the officer to a small room with a computer. The officer, who introduced himself as Detective Vargas, closed the door behind them and sat down at the desk. "We have officially confirmed some details about the guide who took your wife and daughter on the river tour," Detective Vargas began. "His name is Ricky Gyro, and he was not an official guide employed by your hotel." Jordan's heart sank. "What?" "He was not registered with any tour company. According to people in his village, he works various freelance jobs, sometimes fishing, sometimes odd jobs for tourists." The detective pulled up some files on his computer. "We've also analyzed the river conditions from the day they disappeared. The weather reports show no storms in the area they would have traveled, and the current levels were normal." "But what about the boat?" Jordan asked. "You found it damaged." "Yes, but the damage doesn't appear to be from natural causes," Detective Vargas explained, showing Jordan photos of the recovered canoe. "See these breaks in the wood? The pattern and the splinters suggest human interference, not damage from rocks or water." Jordan leaned back in his chair, trying to process this information. "What are you saying? That they were kidnapped? By this Ricky Gyro?" Detective Vargas stood up and walked to the door, checking the hallway before closing it again. He returned to his seat and leaned in, lowering his voice. "I don't trust everyone in this station, Senor Hart, so I need to be careful about what I say." He glanced at the door again. "My team heard rumors in Jairo's village. Someone saw a group of people find Jairo's body and take it away. When questioned further, the witnesses became silent. Nobody would say who these people were or where they took him." Jordan felt a chill run down his spine. "His body? He's dead?" "That, too, we can't officially confirm, but the locals believe it," the detective said with a grim nod. "This isn't public information yet, and technically I shouldn't be telling you. But you deserve to know. I have reason to believe someone at this station already knows about it and is deliberately keeping quiet. Those villages are tight-knit, and several of our officers patrol those areas regularly. They must have heard something." "Do you have suspects?" Jordan asked. "I have my suspicions, but no evidence," Detective Vargas replied. "I can't tell you more than that." Jordan ran his hands through his still damp hair. "If these people killed Jairo, what about my wife and daughter? Are they in danger too?" "We haven't heard anything about tourists being murdered," the detective said. "Locals often hesitate to harm foreign tourists, especially Americans, because it draws too much unwanted attention. But I can't make any guarantees." "So what's our next step?" Jordan asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "I found coordinates carved into a tree, but my phone is ruined. The officers I was with, Mendoza and Ruiz, they acted strange when they saw it." Detective Vargas's eyebrows rose. "Mendoza and Ruiz were with you today? Their behavior confirms my suspicions." Jordan pulled out the note from his pocket. "I wrote down what I could remember of the coordinates. When I searched them, they pointed to somewhere in Vopay Department." The detective took the paper and typed the partial coordinates into his computer. After a moment, he frowned. "This entire area is vast remote jungle," he said, pointing to a large green section on the map. "Parts of it are known for illegal trafficking and drug routes. If these coordinates are significant, it would explain why those officers were acting suspiciously." Jordan studied the detective's face, trying to determine if he could trust him. "Detective Vargas, can I trust you?" "I can't vouch for myself, Senor Hart. If I did, you probably wouldn't believe me," the detective replied honestly. He turned his computer screen toward Jordan. "But I can show you my record. These are the corruption cases I've handled in the past 5 years. 17 officers from this region alone, all serving time now." He met Jordan's gaze steadily. "You'll have to decide for yourself if you want to trust me or not." Jordan studied the case files on Detective Vargas's screen, noting the meticulous documentation of corruption investigations. Something in the detective's straightforward manner and willingness to show his credentials resonated with Jordan. If he couldn't trust this man, he couldn't trust anyone in this country. "I trust you," Jordan said finally. Detective Vargas nodded, satisfaction flickering across his face. "Good. Now listen carefully. We cannot simply go to these coordinates without a proper plan. The area is dangerous, not just because of the jungle, but because of who controls it. If we encounter armed traffickers, it could end badly for all of us." "So what do we do?" "My family could be there. I will send some of my trusted men to join the search expedition that Mendoza and Ruiz are planning. They'll keep an eye on things and protect you if necessary." "You're not coming yourself?" Jordan asked, disappointed. The detective shook his head. "My presence would raise too many alarms. Everyone in this station knows my reputation. If I suddenly join a search mission led by officers I've investigated before, they'll know something is wrong." He placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "But I promise you can trust my men. They've worked with me for years." Jordan nodded reluctantly. "I understand. Return to the waiting room. Act normal. Pretend you know nothing about this conversation." Jordan did as instructed, his mind whirling with new information. The scope of corruption here was staggering. How many officers were involved? Was it limited to this station, or did it extend further? He had been sitting in the waiting room for less than 20 minutes when Officers Mendoza and Ruiz approached. "Senor Hart," Officer Mendoza said, "we have developed a plan for continuing the search." Jordan looked up, carefully maintaining a neutral expression. "That's great news." "We will visit a village close to the coordinates you found," Officer Ruiz explained. "We'll establish a base camp there and conduct searches in the surrounding area for 1 week, sending out multiple teams." "You may accompany us," Officer Mendoza added, "but you must follow our lead. We cannot risk your safety, as we have vouched for your presence here." "Of course," Jordan agreed, playing along as he and Detective Vargas had discussed. "I appreciate all your help." After gathering supplies and making final preparations, they departed for the village. Jordan learned they would be traveling in 2 police jeeps, with a total of 5 police personnel, all selected by Mendoza and Ruiz. Detective Vargas had whispered to him before leaving that a backup team of his trusted officers would arrive later, without the others knowing. The journey to the village, Puerto Esperanza, they called it, took nearly 3 hours over rough, barely passable roads. The dense jungle occasionally gave way to small clearings, but mostly they traveled through tunnels of green, the road nothing more than tire tracks through the wilderness. By the time they arrived, Jordan felt nauseated from the constant bouncing and swaying of the vehicle. Officer Ruiz noticed his discomfort and offered him a pill. "For the nausea," he explained, "many tourists get carsick on these roads." Jordan took the pill but didn't swallow it, palming it instead. His trust in these officers had evaporated completely. Puerto Esperanza was little more than a collection of wooden structures nestled along the riverbank. Children played in the dirt streets, and a few older men lounged in the shade, watching the police vehicles with disinterest. No one greeted them or seemed particularly welcoming. "The locals here are cautious with strangers," Officer Mendoza explained as they unloaded their equipment. "Don't take it personally." Jordan was led to his accommodation, a small room in a local family's home. The space was spare but clean, with a narrow bed, a small table, and a wooden chair. The family that owned the house barely acknowledged him, their faces expressionless as Officer Ruiz explained the arrangements. "It's getting dark," Officer Mendoza said. "We'll begin our search early tomorrow morning. Get some rest, Senor Hart." Left alone, Jordan set the pill on the table, still unwilling to take any medication from the officers. His nausea gradually subsided as he sat quietly, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The room grew darker as night fell, the only light coming from a small oil lamp on the table. No electricity here, Jordan realized. He stretched out on the bed, not expecting to sleep, his mind too full of worry and suspicion. Every creak of the wooden house made him tense. Every distant voice made him wonder if it was Julia or Daphne. Were they close? Were they still alive? The questions tormented him as he lay in the unfamiliar darkness. He must have drifted off despite his anxiety, because the next thing he knew, he was startled awake by the slight squeak of his door opening. In the dim light, he saw a shadowy figure slip into his room. Before he could react, the intruder lunged at him, pressing a pillow over his face. Jordan thrashed wildly, trying to throw off his attacker, but the man was powerful, his grip like iron. Jordan clawed at the man's arms, fighting desperately for air, but then he felt another set of hands grabbing his legs and arms, pinning him down. 2 attackers, working together. He continued to struggle, his lungs burning, spots dancing in his vision. His strength began to wane, his movements becoming weaker and more uncoordinated. The last thing Jordan heard before losing consciousness was one of the men whispering in Spanish, "Make sure he doesn't wake up until we reach the camp." Then darkness claimed him. Consciousness returned to Jordan in waves, his mind rising from darkness into a hazy twilight of awareness. His head throbbed, and his mouth felt dry as sandpaper. He tried to move, but found his limbs heavy and uncooperative. As his vision cleared, he realized he was in a dimly lit space, the only illumination filtering down from above through what appeared to be metal bars. A prison cell? He was lying on a dirt floor, damp and cold against his skin. Jordan forced himself to sit up, ignoring the wave of dizziness that washed over him. Looking up, he could see people walking on a level above him, their shadows crossing the bars that separated his underground prison from the world above. "Hello?" he called out, his voice hoarse. "Is anyone there? I need help." In response, something small and hard, a stone, came flying through the bars, landing painfully on his shoulder. "Hey!" Jordan shouted again. Another stone followed, this one narrowly missing his head. "It's no use," a voice spoke from the darkness behind him. "They'll just keep throwing stones if you make noise." Jordan whirled around, heart pounding. He hadn't realized he wasn't alone. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he made out the silhouette of a man sitting against the far wall of the cell. "Who are you?" Jordan asked, his voice lowered. The man shifted, moving into a patch of light. He appeared to be in his 30s, with the weathered complexion of someone who spent much time outdoors. His clothes were torn and dirty, his face bruised. "My name doesn't matter here," the man replied in accented English. "We're both in the same situation. Prisoners in their drug lab." "Drug lab?" Jordan repeated. "What drug lab? Where are we?" The man laughed bitterly. "You don't know? This is a cocaine processing facility, hidden deep in the jungle where authorities can't find it, or won't look." His emphasis on the last 3 words was unmistakable. "But there were police with me," Jordan said, confusion clouding his thoughts. "We came to a village." "Police?" The man laughed again, the sound hollow and mirthless. "Those weren't real police. Or maybe they were. It doesn't matter. Many police here work for the cartels. They're paid well to look the other way, or sometimes to deliver people like you." Jordan's blood ran cold as the realization sank in. The corrupt officers had never intended to help him find his family. They had delivered him straight into the hands of their criminal associates. "Wait," Jordan said, studying the man more closely. Are you Ricky Gyro?" The man's eyebrows rose in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "I'm Jordan Hart. My wife Julia and daughter Daphne were with you on a river tour 9 weeks ago. All of you disappeared." Recognition dawned in Gyro's eyes. "You are Julia's husband, the American?" "Yes." Jordan moved closer. "Do you know where they are? Are they alive?" Gyro nodded slowly. "I have heard their voices here some days. They walk above us, near the prison bars." He gestured upward. "But it has been 3 days since I last heard them. These people are always moving prisoners around. I don't know where they might be now." Relief and fear battled within Jordan. His family was, or had been, alive, but they were prisoners of what appeared to be a drug cartel. "What happened that day on the river?" Jordan asked. "How did you all end up here?" Before Gyro could answer, the sound of a heavy door opening came from above. Both men looked up to see the metal grate being moved aside. A rope ladder was lowered into the cell. "Gyro, up!" a man's voice commanded in Spanish. Gyro stood, looking resigned. Jordan tried to approach the ladder too, desperate to get out and search for his family, but one of the men above aimed a kick at his face, catching him in the chest instead and sending him sprawling back into the darkness. "Wait for your turn," the man snarled in English. "We'll come for you soon enough." Gyro climbed the ladder and disappeared through the opening. Jordan could hear voices above him, and though he couldn't catch every word, what he did hear made his blood freeze. "This is your last day, Gyro," someone said. "The buyer's ready for you. Don't worry, we'll make sure they chop you up real neat." Organ trafficking. The realization hit Jordan like a physical blow. These people weren't just drug manufacturers, they were selling human organs too. Before he could process this horrifying revelation, the grate opened again. Another man peered down, this one holding a pistol. "You too! Come with us," he ordered, dropping the ladder again. "Lots of buyers, lots of money." He brandished the gun. "Try anything funny, and I shoot you right here." Jordan climbed the ladder with shaking hands, emerging into a large warehouse-like structure. The space was filled with barrels, workbenches covered with various chemicals, and people working in masks and gloves. A drug processing facility, just as Gyro had said. Ricky Gyro stood nearby, flanked by armed guards. Several other frightened-looking people, all appearing malnourished and disheveled, were being herded toward the door. Through a dirty window, Jordan saw a truck approaching. Armed men jumped out as it stopped, and Jordan and the other prisoners were forced toward the vehicle. As he climbed into the back of the truck, the sound of another engine caught his attention. Turning, he saw a second truck pulling into the compound. And there, bound and being led from the second truck, were Julia and Daphne. "Julia! Daphne!" Jordan screamed, his heart nearly bursting at the sight of them. They turned at the sound of his voice, their eyes widening in recognition and hope. For one brief, precious moment, their gazes locked across the compound. Then a guard's gun butt connected with Jordan's face, sending him sprawling onto the truck bed. Warm blood trickled from his nose as the truck engine roared to life. Blood dripped from Jordan's nose onto his shirt as the truck rumbled away from the compound, carrying him, Ricky Gyro, and 3 other prisoners through the dense jungle. 2 armed guards sat at the back of the truck, weapons trained on their captives. The image of Julia and Daphne burned in Jordan's mind. They were alive, thin, dirty, and frightened, but alive. After 9 weeks of torment, of not knowing, he had finally found them, only to be separated again. The cruel irony threatened to overwhelm him. But seeing them had ignited something in Jordan, a fierce determination that surpassed fear. He couldn't lose them again. He wouldn't. Jordan glanced at the nearest guard, assessing him. The man was young, perhaps in his early 20s, with a nervous energy that suggested inexperience. The gun in his hand, a pistol similar to the one that had been pressed against Jordan's back, wavered slightly with the truck's movement. Jordan knew he had to act. Any hope that Detective Vargas's men might rescue him had evaporated. His only chance, and his family's only chance, rested in his own hands. As the truck navigated a particularly rough stretch of road, Jordan launched himself forward, grabbing the young guard's wrist and twisting it upward. The gun discharged with a deafening crack, the bullet tearing through the truck's canvas roof. The other prisoners scattered, pressing themselves against the sides of the truck as Jordan grappled with the guard. With a desperate strength he didn't know he possessed, Jordan brought his knee up hard into the man's stomach, then wrenched the gun from his grasp. The second guard raised his weapon, but Jordan was faster, swinging the pistol toward him. "Drop it!" he shouted. "Drop it now!" In the moment of hesitation that followed, Ricky Gyro and 2 other prisoners surged forward, tackling the second guard. The truck swerved wildly as the driver realized what was happening behind him. Shots rang out, the driver firing blindly through the rear window of the cab. One of the prisoners cried out and fell, blood blossoming on his chest. "Jump!" Jordan yelled, pushing Gyro toward the back of the still-moving truck. "Everyone, jump now!" The remaining prisoners didn't need to be told twice. They leapt from the vehicle, rolling as they hit the dirt road. Jordan followed, tucking his shoulder and tumbling down a slight embankment before coming to rest among ferns and fallen leaves. Pain shot through his shoulder, but Jordan ignored it, scrambling to his feet. The truck had skidded to a stop about 50 yards ahead. The driver and his assistant were climbing out, guns drawn. Jordan darted into the dense undergrowth, using the trees for cover as he circled back toward the compound. He had to reach Julia and Daphne before they were moved again. A shout from behind told him he'd been spotted. A bullet splintered bark from a tree inches from his head. Jordan ducked lower and ran harder, zigzagging through the vegetation. When he was certain he'd put enough distance between himself and his pursuers, Jordan paused, gasping for breath. He checked the gun he'd taken, 6 bullets left in the magazine. Not much, but better than nothing. Orienting himself using the sun's position, Jordan began moving in what he hoped was the direction of the drug compound. Time was critical. If that second truck had been preparing to move Julia and Daphne elsewhere, he might already be too late. After 15 minutes of careful navigation through the jungle, Jordan spotted a clearing ahead. Crouching behind a massive fallen tree, he surveyed the scene. The drug compound was larger than he'd initially realized, a collection of buildings surrounded by a chain-link fence. Armed men patrolled the perimeter, and trucks came and went through a guarded gate. Jordan's heart sank as he saw the truck that had been carrying Julia, and Daphne was no longer where it had been parked. Had they already been moved? Then he spotted them, being transferred from the building where he'd seen them to a different truck, this one more modern and well-maintained than the others. A man in expensive-looking clothes, flanked by 2 bodyguards, supervised the transfer. He appeared to be giving orders, his gestures authoritative and impatient. The boss, Jordan guessed. Panic coursed through him. Once that truck left with his family, he might never find them again. A commotion at the main gate caught his attention. Men were shouting, pointing toward the jungle, toward the direction from which Jordan had come. The driver of his escape truck must have returned and raised the alarm. Jordan needed to act now, while attention was diverted elsewhere. Staying low, he circled to approach the compound from a different angle, one with less visible security. As he neared the fence, Jordan noticed a tent set up near one of the smaller buildings. Something familiar caught his eye, his backpack tossed carelessly on a table inside the tent. Glancing around to ensure no one was watching, Jordan slipped under a loose section of fence and darted to the tent. Inside, he found not only his backpack but also his phone and the battery he had removed after it fell into the river. Jordan grabbed his belongings, checking quickly inside the backpack. The sharpened wood piece from the forest was still there, the one he'd found near the carved coordinates. He pocketed it, then retrieved his phone and battery. With trembling hands, he reassembled the phone and pressed the power button, hardly daring to hope. To his astonishment, the screen flickered to life, though with visible water damage clouding parts of the display. The touch sensors were erratic, sometimes responding several inches away from where he pressed. But it worked, sort of. Jordan ducked behind the building as voices approached. Through a gap in the wall panels, he watched as Julia and Daphne were loaded into the waiting truck. They looked thin and exhausted, their clothes dirty and torn. Daphne's face was streaked with tears, while Julia's expression was vacant, almost catatonic. The sight tore at Jordan's heart. What had they endured these past 9 weeks? The truck's engine started. It was now or never. Jordan dialed the emergency number, praying the call would connect. After several agonizing seconds, an operator answered. "Emergency services. What is your emergency?" "My name is Jordan Hart," he whispered urgently. "I'm an American citizen. I've been kidnapped by a drug cartel in the Vaupes region. They also have my wife and daughter." He described his situation quickly, emphasizing the urgency. "Please connect me with Detective Vargas in Mitu. I believe there are corrupt police involved in this operation." "Stay on the line, senor," the operator instructed. "We will try to trace your location." "My phone is damaged," Jordan explained. "It could die at any moment. I'll keep the line open as long as I can." As he spoke, Jordan began moving through the compound, staying in the shadows, following the truck that now carried his family. It moved slowly through the jungle road, likely due to the rough terrain, allowing him to keep pace at a distance. "I can see some kind of structure ahead," Jordan told the operator, describing the building that had come into view. "It looks like another facility or outpost." "Detective Vargas's team reports they are in a nearby village," the operator relayed. "They will reach your location soon." The signal began to break up as Jordan moved deeper into the jungle, following the truck. Static crackled through the sporadic words of the operator until finally the call died completely. Jordan was on his own again, but closer to his family than he had been in 9 weeks. The jungle canopy thinned as Jordan approached the structure he'd glimpsed earlier. It was a concrete building, more substantial than those at the drug processing facility, with a corrugated metal roof and barred windows. A high fence surrounded the property, with armed guards stationed at intervals along its perimeter. The truck carrying Julia and Daphne had pulled up to a loading dock at the rear of the building. Jordan crouched behind a dense clump of vegetation, observing as his wife and daughter were escorted inside, still bound at the wrists. Through an open door, Jordan could see they were being taken to a room down a corridor. The guards stationed themselves outside the door, rifles held across their chests. This place was less busy than the drug compound, with fewer personnel visible. That might work to his advantage, fewer people to overcome if he attempted a rescue. But he was still significantly outnumbered, with only a pistol containing 6 bullets against what appeared to be at least 8 armed men. As Jordan considered his options, a sleek black SUV approached the compound. It drove through the gates without being stopped, suggesting the occupants were expected or known to the guards. The SUV parked near the entrance, and a well-dressed man emerged from the passenger side. He carried a leather briefcase and was accompanied by 2 bodyguards in dark suits, an unusual sight in the jungle heat. Jordan's blood ran cold as he realized what he was witnessing: a transaction. Someone had come to purchase his wife and daughter. Inside the building, the visitors were greeted by the man Jordan had identified as the boss at the drug facility. The 2 men shook hands and disappeared inside, followed by their respective security details. Jordan couldn't wait any longer. Detective Vargas's men might be on their way, but they could arrive too late. He needed to act now. Gripping the pistol, Jordan began to circle the compound, looking for the weakest point in their security. The back of the property, where the jungle grew closest to the fence, seemed to have only 1 guard patrolling. Jordan waited until the guard's back was turned, then sprinted across the open space to the fence. He slipped through a gap where the chain link had been cut and poorly repaired, tearing his shirt in the process but making it through undetected. Once inside the perimeter, Jordan pressed himself against the building's wall, inching toward the door where Julia and Daphne had been taken. His heart hammered so loudly in his chest he feared the guards might hear it. As he neared the door, he could hear voices from inside, the boss and the buyer, discussing terms. "Quality merchandise," the buyer was saying. "Especially the girl, young, healthy, perfect for our clients." "The woman is worth just as much," the boss replied. "Organ harvesting pays premium for healthy adult specimens." Jordan's stomach lurched. They were talking about his family like they were livestock, calculating their value based on the parts of their bodies that could be sold. A wave of rage overwhelmed his fear. Without fully considering the consequences, Jordan stepped into the open doorway, gun raised. "Let them go," he demanded, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. The room fell silent. The boss and the buyer turned to stare at him, along with their bodyguards, who immediately reached for their weapons. "Don't move," Jordan shouted, aiming the gun at the boss. "Tell your men to back off, or I'll shoot." The boss raised his hands slowly, a calculating look in his eyes. "You're making a mistake," he said calmly. "You think you can walk out of here with them? There are 20 men outside. You'll never make it to the gate." The buyer, visibly annoyed, turned to the boss. "This is not my problem. I'm leaving. Our deal is off until you handle your security issues." He gestured to his bodyguards and began moving toward the door. "No one leaves," Jordan insisted, swinging the gun toward the buyer. "Not until my family is safe." One of the bodyguards lunged at Jordan while his attention was divided. The gun went off as they struggled, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling. Strong hands gripped Jordan's arms, wrenching the weapon away. As Jordan fought to regain control, the door behind him burst open. More men poured in, and for a moment Jordan thought it was the end, until he heard a familiar voice shout in Spanish, "Police!" Nobody move. Jordan turned to see Ricky Gyro entering with a team of armed officers, their weapons trained on the traffickers. Chaos erupted as the police stormed into the room. The buyer's bodyguards drew their weapons, and gunfire exploded in the confined space. Jordan, still restrained by one of the boss's men, used the distraction to break free, slamming his elbow into his captor's ribs. As the man doubled over in pain, Jordan spotted another guard moving to flank the police. Without thinking, Jordan tackled him from behind, sending them both crashing into a stack of crates. The guard recovered quickly, pinning Jordan to the ground with a forearm across his throat. As black spots danced in Jordan's vision, he remembered the sharpened wood in his pocket, the makeshift tool that had carved those life-saving coordinates into the tree. With his remaining strength, Jordan worked his hand into his pocket and wrapped his fingers around the wooden shard. In one desperate movement, he drove it into the guard's thigh. The man howled in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Jordan to twist free. He scrambled away, grabbing the guard's dropped pistol as he did. Across the room, the police were steadily gaining control of the situation. Several of the traffickers lay on the ground, hands behind their heads, while others had retreated further into the building, exchanging gunfire with the advancing officers. But Jordan had only one thought: finding Julia and Daphne. He slipped out of the main room and down the corridor where he'd seen them taken earlier. 2 guards stood outside a door at the end of the hall, looking uncertain whether to join the fight or maintain their post. They made their decision when they saw Jordan approaching with a gun. Both raised their weapons, but Jordan was faster, firing twice. One guard fell immediately. The other staggered backward, but remained standing, taking aim at Jordan. Before the guard could fire, a shot rang out from behind Jordan. The guard collapsed, revealing Ricky Gyro standing in the corridor, a police-issue handgun in his hands. "Your family is in there?" Gyro asked, nodding toward the door. Jordan nodded, his throat too tight with emotion to speak. "Then let's get them out," Gyro said simply. Together they approached the door. It was locked, but a well-placed kick from Gyro sent it crashing inward. Inside, Julia and Daphne sat bound to chairs, their eyes wide with fear at the sudden intrusion. When they recognized Jordan, Daphne let out a sob of relief, while Julia's expression remained strangely blank, as if she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. "Dad!" Daphne cried, as Jordan rushed to untie her. "You found us! You really found us!" "I promised I would never stop looking," Jordan said, his voice breaking as he worked on the ropes binding his daughter's wrists. "I'm so sorry it took so long." Once Daphne was free, she threw her arms around Jordan's neck, clinging to him as if afraid he might disappear. Over her shoulder, Jordan met Julia's eyes as Gyro untied her bonds. "Julia," he whispered, reaching out to touch her face. "It's me. It's really me." Julia blinked slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "Jordan?" she murmured, her voice hoarse from disuse or screaming. Jordan couldn't tell which, and the thought made his heart constrict painfully. Before they could say more, the sound of approaching vehicles filled the air. Through the window, Jordan could see police trucks surrounding the compound, officers in tactical gear pouring out. "Backup has arrived," Gyro announced. "We should go." As they made their way back through the corridor, they passed the main room where the initial confrontation had taken place. The boss and several of his men were being handcuffed and led outside. The buyer had been caught as well, his expensive suit now dusty and torn, his face a mask of fury as he was escorted to a waiting police vehicle. Outside, the compound was swarming with officers. Jordan spotted a familiar face among them, one of Detective Vargas's trusted men, who approached with a satellite phone. "Senor Hart," the officer said, offering the phone, "Detective Vargas wishes to speak with you." Jordan took the phone, keeping one arm firmly around Daphne, who refused to leave his side. "Jordan? Are you all right?" Detective Vargas's voice crackled through the speaker. "We're alive," Jordan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "All of us. Your men arrived just in time." "I'm glad to hear it," the detective said. "My team has secured the drug processing facility as well. 5 corrupt officers have been arrested and are being brought to my station as we speak. The rest of the cartel members are either in custody or being pursued." "Thank you," Jordan said simply, knowing the words were inadequate for what the detective had done. "An ambulance is on its way to your location," Vargas continued. "I'll see you all back at the station." As Jordan handed back the phone, he drew both Julia and Daphne close, savoring the feel of them in his arms again. After 9 weeks of hell, they were finally together. A medic approached to check their conditions, particularly Julia, who seemed the most physically affected by their ordeal. As she was guided toward one of the waiting vehicles, Jordan noticed Ricky Gyro speaking with several officers, gesturing animatedly. "Is he really helping the police?" Jordan asked the officer beside him. "Gyro?" the officer replied. "Yes, after he escaped the truck with you, he found one of our patrols and led them back." Jordan nodded, making a mental note to thank the man properly when things calmed down. Whatever Gyro's initial motives might have been, he had helped save their lives in the end. As the convoy of vehicles prepared to depart, Jordan held Daphne's hand tightly, unwilling to let go even for a second. They climbed into one of the medical transport vehicles with Julia, beginning the long journey back to civilization. The nightmare wasn't over. The physical and emotional scars would take time to heal. But they were alive, and they were together. For now, that was enough. The sterile white walls of the hospital room in Mitu were a stark contrast to the green jungle that had been their prison for so long. Jordan sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair between 2 beds, Julia in one, Daphne in the other, both sleeping peacefully under the influence of mild sedatives administered by the doctors. Their physical conditions, while serious, weren't as dire as Jordan had feared. Malnutrition, dehydration, numerous insect bites, a few minor infections, all treatable. The psychological trauma, however, would take much longer to address. A soft knock on the door pulled Jordan from his thoughts. Detective Vargas entered, looking tired but satisfied. "How are they?" the detective asked quietly, nodding toward the sleeping figures. "Stable," Jordan replied. "The doctors want to keep them for observation for a few days, then we can fly home to the States." He ran a hand through his hair, which was still matted with jungle debris. "I can't thank you enough for what you did. Without your help—" Vargas waved away the gratitude. "I was doing my job, Senor Hart, the job I swore to do when I became a police officer." He pulled up a chair and sat beside Jordan. "I thought you might want an update on the situation." Jordan nodded, careful not to disturb Daphne, whose hand was still clutched in his even in sleep. "We've dismantled a significant operation," Vargas began. "Not just the drug processing facility, but a human trafficking network that extended into 3 countries. The man who came to purchase? Your family was a broker for a larger organization that specializes in organ harvesting, and—" He glanced at Daphne and chose not to finish the sentence. Jordan swallowed hard. "And the corrupt officers?" "All 5 are in custody and facing substantial prison sentences. We found evidence linking them to at least a dozen similar cases. Tourists who disappeared in remote areas, locals who were never reported missing. This may be the largest corruption case in the department's history." "What about Ricky Gyro?" Jordan asked. "I still don't understand his role in all this." Vargas sighed. "We've spent considerable time questioning him. His story is complicated. He admits he's not a hotel employee, but a petty thief who occasionally posed as a guide to rob tourists." Jordan's expression hardened. "He put my family in danger." "Yes, but not intentionally in this case," Vargas explained. "According to Gyro, he was planning to take your wife and daughter on a short detour, rob them of their valuables, and return them to the hotel, frightened but unharmed. He's done it before." "But something went wrong," Jordan guessed. Vargas nodded. He wasn't familiar with that particular river route. He took a wrong turn and accidentally entered territory controlled by the cartel. They were witnesses to operations that no outsider should see. The cartel took all three prisoner. And then what happened? Jairo claims he tried to make a deal with the cartel. They sent him back to the village as a test to see if he would alert authorities. But by then, you had already reported your family missing, and police were searching the area. The corrupt officers, Jordan said, the pieces falling into place. Exactly. They saw Jairo return alone and realized what had happened. They captured him and sent him back to the cartel, convincing them he needed to be eliminated before he could reveal your family's whereabouts. That's how he ended up in that underground cell with you, awaiting organ harvesting. Jordan fell silent, processing this information. After a moment, he asked, "What will happen to him?" "He'll face charges for attempted robbery and endangerment, but his cooperation and assistance in the rescue will be taken into consideration," Vargas replied. "Colombian justice is not always swift, but it tries to be fair." Their conversation was interrupted by movement from Julia's bed. She was awake, listening to them with clear, alert eyes, the most present she had seemed since the rescue. "Julia," Jordan said, moving quickly to her side. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she whispered, her voice still weak. "Is it really over?" "It's over," Jordan assured her, taking her hand. "We're safe now." Detective Vargas stood. "I'll leave you to talk. The doctor mentioned you might feel ready to give a statement soon, Senora Hart, but there's no rush. Take all the time you need." After the detective left, Julia squeezed Jordan's hand. "I need to tell you what happened." "You don't have to do this now," Jordan said gently. "I do, before I lose my courage." She took a deep breath. "After they captured us, they separated us at first. Daphne was kept with other women, but I was taken to work in the lab. They forced me to handle chemicals, dangerous ones for making cocaine. My hands..." She held up her palms, which bore the reddish marks of chemical burns. "If I made mistakes, they'd threaten Daphne." Jordan felt rage building inside him again, but forced himself to remain calm for Julia's sake. "We were moved between facilities every few days," she continued. "Sometimes the main lab, sometimes warehouses in small villages. During transport, I started noticing one of the guards had a GPS device. I memorized coordinates I saw on the screen." "The tree," Jordan said. "That was you." Julia nodded. "Whenever we'd stop and I'd ask to use the bathroom, I'd look for a tree I could mark. I'd scratch a little bit each time, hoping someone would notice. I didn't know if anyone was even looking for us anymore, but I had to try." "I never stopped looking," Jordan said firmly. "Not for a single day." Tears filled Julia's eyes. "I knew you wouldn't. That's what kept me going." She swallowed hard. 2 weeks ago, I overheard the guards talking. They said we were becoming too much trouble to keep. They knew we were American tourists and worried about attention. They were planning to sell me to organ traffickers and Daphne to sex traffickers." Jordan felt physically ill at her words. "Julia, I'm so sorry." "That's when I decided to finish the coordinates," she continued, her voice stronger now. "I knew it was our last chance. I didn't know if the tree was anywhere people would search, but I had to try something. I couldn't let them take Daphne." A small voice came from the other bed. "Mom?" Daphne was awake, her young face solemn beyond her years. "Did you really save us by writing on a tree?" Julia managed a small smile. "I tried, sweetheart, but your father is the one who found it and understood what it meant." "We all saved each other," Jordan said, moving to sit on the edge of Daphne's bed, still holding Julia's hand across the gap between beds. "That's what families do." For the first time since their rescue, Daphne smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. It was small and tentative, but it was there, a sign that somewhere beneath the trauma, their daughter was still whole. The road to recovery would be long, There would be nightmares, therapy sessions, moments of fear and doubt. But looking at his wife and daughter, both battered but unbroken, Jordan felt a surge of determination. They had survived the unimaginable. They had found each other across impossible odds. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they had faced the darkness of the Amazon. Outside the hospital window, the edge of the vast jungle was visible, green and impenetrable, hiding both beauty and terror within its depths. But its power to frighten them was diminished now. They had seen its worst and emerged on the other side, forever changed, but not defeated. As the afternoon sun cast golden light across their hospital room, Jordan made a silent promise to both Julia and Daphne. No matter what came next, they would never be separated again. The coordinates carved into that tree had been more than a location. They had been a message of hope, a testament to human resilience, and ultimately the thread that had led their family back together. In the jungle's darkness, they had found their way home.